A jet fighter crashes into a Ramada Inn. It kills 9 people. But looking at it makes you wonder why more didn't die. Hello and welcome to American Heat. I'm Don Marsh.
And I'm Ron Barber. It began as a routine flight from Pittsburgh to Nellis Air Force Base near Las Vegas. So says the Air Force. But just south of Indianapolis, something went wrong.
Fire department.
Yes, the Ramada Inn over on Airport Expressway is on fire.
Okay. Fire department.
The airplane crashed over here in Airport Expressway.
Okay, we have a map.
Thanks.
Fire department.
The Ramada blew up.
Okay, we got an airplane crash, ma'am. We're on our way.
Okay.
We saw the pilot's seat go flying through the air, then we saw the pilot land safely.
They hit the top of the bank and it was already inflamed, and it went right into the main lobby.
Get all ALS equipment, all BLS equipment, and all that we need.
I was in the back of the kitchen, and all of a sudden the back doors just opened, and everything just started flying, and we just took off out the back door because someone said something hit the hotel.
The A-7 Corsair jet fighter looks like this. The Air Force says the engine flamed out on the one that crashed. The pilot chose to try to make it to the Indianapolis airport for an emergency landing on its 10,000-foot main runway. The FAA control tower notified the airport fire department.
We've had them land here before with flame outs, and they've been successful. But I guess one of the key things for that particular day, though, was that the overcast ceiling was so low that you basically couldn't see, or the pilot basically couldn't see the runway or see the airport or basically anything else for that matter.
When the A-7 broke through the clouds, it was apparent it had overshot the runway. The control tower radioed the pilot to make a turn and land on a perpendicular runway.
He made his turn, and the next thing the tower said was something just happened. He fired a rocket. In effect, it turned out to be his ejection seat that was ejected rather than being a rocket.
The pilot ejected. His jet clipped the top of a one-story bank, skidded through a ditch and across a road, and slammed into the lobby of the Ramada Inn.
Wayne Township Airport Command. Airport Command. Yes, sir. We have an A-7 military aircraft down. A-7 military aircraft down behind the Ramada Inn on the Airport Expressway. It is a confirmed crash.
Engine 11, Engine 2, Engine 9, Engine 10, Truck 9, Ambulances 1, 2, 4, and 9 on home response. An airplane crash into the Ramada Inn, 5400 West Bradbury.
We have 2 Oshkosh P4s that responded, and we also had a heavy rescue, a light rescue, which is our EMT truck and a command vehicle. We positioned one truck on the east side of the building, basically in front, and another one on the west side of the building in front, and they both attacked it as if it was an aircraft, as if they were sitting up on the nose of an aircraft, basically. And with both turrets going with about 750 gallons per minute, they were able to basically cross in front of each other and knock the largest majority of the fire out, even before the responding mutual aid companies had even responded on the scene.
Using what?
Using AFFF light water.
Wayne Township, a volunteer fire department 350 strong, rolled into action. Deputy Chief Larry Curl became the incident commander on the scene.
We've got a major disaster developing. We've got a lot of people we've got to contend with. I've got to immediately start putting in some sectors. I've got to start staging some people into some command positions. Our first and foremost thought was our EMS. So immediately I took a division chief that we have and put him in charge of the EMS command. The next thing that we had to control or to contend with is we had to start staging some of our incoming apparatus.
Everybody started search and rescue, basically, in one area, and then in another area, the handlines are being advanced into the building to kind of control this aircraft fire. I think the biggest part of the fire was basically jet fuel.
Initially, when I walked through the doors of the Summerfield, only thing I could see was just balls of fire to the east of me, to the left as I walked in. but immediately I recognized the restaurant and the bar itself was still intact and not a whole lot of smoke. So me and a partner of mine decided we were going to search the restaurant and the bar first. Firefighting effort. It was kind of impossible at that time because we didn't have phone lines established.
While the interior attack and search and rescue began, an EMS sector was established. In fact, only 3 victims were transported. However, authorities were prepared for the worst.
We set up a second triage. So we had triage on both ends of it, and we were covered then at that point. If anyone was going to be brought out of the building, they would have fallen into the hands. As the firefighters brought them out, they would have been turned over immediately to EMS personnel in a triage, which they would have been triaged and taken to a treatment area, which was established right across the street beside the command post. We had an extra supply truck, an ALS truck, and a BLS truck staged right there at EMS command with the treatment area.
And the same held true at hospitals, where internal disaster plans were activated. A major problem developed on the scene early on when firefighters searching for other people on the hotel floors were not sure if that jet fighter was armed or not armed.
Everyone here is ex-military, so we know, from the military standpoint, you've got 90 seconds basically to put the fire out, and then you've got at least 5 minutes before any of the weapons could ignite, basically, or could explode. So we operated under that assumption that, we've got at least 5 minutes to work with. Let's get in and try to do the best job we can. And at the same time, my function is to try to find this information out. Is there weapons on board? So one of the things I had to initially do was call our dispatcher and have him to try to find out whether this aircraft had anything. Call flight service, see if they had any record of it, where the guy originally started from, where it was going to, and hopefully he could call to the pilot's home base and find out whether there was a weapon on board or not.
Commanders took the word of injured pilot Bruce Teagarden that the plane was not armed and continued their efforts. Another problem, getting accurate numbers on just how many people were in that hotel. There were 103 overnight guests, but there were also some 40 to 50 people scheduled for morning meetings in conference rooms.
One of the problems on accountability for a hotel-motel type incident is who stopped in for breakfast this morning, who's in the lobby checking in, who's checking out. You don't have those numbers readily available to you. We started dealing with early on a number of 170 people.
Huh. And that's how you handled it. It could be that big.
We geared up for the possibility of 170 people.
A total of 9 people died on the scene, either on the jet's impact or in the fiery inferno it created.
Took a break, then we went into the laundry room. Me and firefighter Tim Calhoun really found 3 victims in the laundry room. It was very different to find 3 victims. It was my first fatal fire, and a lot of the guys were dealing with it pretty well. But it's very difficult to find 3 bodies for the first time, and I hope it never happens again.
As is the case in most major disasters, it could have been worse. Had the jet struck earlier when the lobby was filled with people checking out or when rooms were filled. Authorities are continuing to evaluate the multi-agency response to this incident. On the EMS side, agencies were ready to handle an even larger disaster. But there was a problem with freelancing. That is, one private ambulance company transported patients, but did not inform incident commanders of this until much later.
If there are private agencies involved, I see where they need to get with the EMS command on the scene initially. If they're the first ones there, then they should be aware that they need to go ahead and start the preliminary triage. If they're going to be supportive units as coming in as to being backups to the initial ones in there, then they'll be deployed in staging. And some of the things that they need to remember is that they keep a driver with their unit in staging, and then they don't bring it into the treatment area until requested. The equipment with that unit stays on the rig. We had a couple of instances where the ambulances in staging were stripped of their jump kits and their cots, and when it came time for that unit to need to transport, now we've got other people's equipment that we're having to piecemeal together to put on the truck to go.
There was also a freelancing problem on the fire suppression side. A few volunteers showed up in turnout gear without checking in, and some equipment was sent to the scene from surrounding fire departments without the knowledge of the incident commander.
Once you come in and you belong to a department and you're really not called for, but yet you show up on the scene, at that point, you really put yourself into a jeopardy situation as well as the department that has a responsibility. You walk up, you're not accounted for, you get inside, something happens. Where do we find you at? How do we know? All we're dealing with at this point is some numbers. The accountability process on freelance firefighting is just almost impossible. We need to have the respect from the fellow firefighters that, hey, if I'm going to show up, I've got to report someplace, I've got to be identified, and then we can maybe help out at that point.
And then there was the problem of getting sound information on whether that jet was armed. Authorities cite plenty of room for improvement in that category.
The military, since their aircraft do fly in civilian airspace, I think the military should have an obligation to inform the civilian airports of, those type of things. They should make it a point to know what the civilian airports need, what type of information they need, just in case this does happen somewhere else. And it has, it has happened in other civilian airports.
There were some communications problems. One department did not use the same tactical frequency that the others did.
We immediately went into a communications mode, whereas we switched to all a point-to-point, what we call a point-to-point frequency is a common frequency shared by all local fire departments. We had some people who did not switch to that frequency, stayed on their own frequency, causing some communication problems. Those are things that, if you're told we need to switch to a point-to-point frequency, if we need to go to a certain area, those things become critical.
And all agencies involved said there were major problems from the very outset with crowd control.
I was on the scene in about 5 minutes from the dispatch time, and I had a hell of a time getting into the scene itself because of all the onlookers that was here. You just almost could not get down the street. So I think if we could have gotten some security to block off some entrances to the park area a little sooner, may have helped us.
Despite all that, authorities report that general cooperation was good. The incident was handled by Wayne Township, with the airport knocking down the initial fire. Indianapolis responded along with Decatur. It was, say people here, a good response.
Pre-planning, disaster planning, there's not interest in that in the fire or the emergency services because we always think it's never going to happen to our community. We did that here. We've had a lot of disaster drills. We've done a lot of pre-planning. That was the key to the success to this operation. Everyone knew what their specific job was going to be, and they performed and performed well.
An emergency landing had become a disaster. Emergency phone lines were flooded with calls.
Yeah, I just seen a plane go down in Park Fletcher. Small plane has hit the main branch, and there is a fire. Ramada Inn at the airport, get as many planes as you can. The whole hotel is just blown up.
What happened out there?
It blew up. It's an explosion. The whole Ramada Inn at the airport.
A disabled Air Force jet trying to make an emergency landing overshot the runway in fog and clipped the roof of a bank branch. The jet then slammed into the second floor of the airport Ramada right above the lobby.
I saw the jet coming in. I saw an explosion. And after the explosion, I saw one parachute open up. And after the parachute opened up, the jet had come in, came off the bank here, Bank 1, and then went into the front of the hotel.
And we ran out here to the front of the building, and of course the front of the building was just a mass of flames. And off to the east of the building, there was at least one person that was on fire, and they tried to get him down. I think they got him down about 3 times before they could actually get him physically put out. it's a real good thing that the fire trucks were able to get here as quick as they did. We're in here probably just a matter of 2 or 3 minutes.
But even then, an out-of-control fire was sweeping through the 7-story, 155-room hotel. Before the crash, many people on the ground could see the jet was in serious trouble.
When it really caught my eye, the plane was just kind of floating. Then I saw the explosion. The plane went down very, very fast. Then I saw the pilot eject and watched him come down.
Did you see an explosion in the air before it did?
Yes, definitely. Very, very big explosion.
Usually on the jet, you can see the exhaust coming out of the back of it, and I didn't see exhaust coming out. His wings were kind of tipping back and forth as if he was trying to keep control of it. It looked like he'd rode it out about as long as he could, and then, like I said, I saw the explosion from the canopy coming off the plane.
Many of the 105 registered guests had checked out of the hotel by 9:15 in the morning. There was a staff of 20 on duty, and several people had arrived for meetings and seminars at the hotel, including this woman.
We heard an explosion, turned around, seen a fireball, and some smoke come in the room, and I just ran out.
2 doctors were having breakfast in the hotel's Summerfields restaurant, very near the impact.
Well, I was facing the window, and I saw the plane. It's a jet fighter, I think. And I thought it was landing, but was landing very, very close to the hotel. But suddenly it hit the roof of the bank, and it slid very low. And just all I saw is a ball of fire, and everything shattered around us, the windows, the chairs.
It was just, 15 feet away from us. We saw a big ball of fire, and everything was shattering around. We dug under the table, and I grabbed my briefcase and ran out of the back door of the hotel.
A hotel guest from Montreal was talking on the phone when the jet slammed right below his 3rd-floor room.
There was an almighty crash, which I thought the elevator, it sounded like the elevator collapsed. I thought that's what my initial thought was. And then I turned around, and coming through the door was smoke. So I opened the door, and it completely covered, the hallway was covered in smoke. There was people running around panicking. There was another big explosion, and that's when I just headed for the exit. There was somebody trying to direct us, and she was pretty good. But we got to one exit, it was on fire. And we're on the 3rd floor, and it was filled with smoke. So we just rushed, everybody just rushed for the other side of the building.
He feared for the lives of 3 people in the room next door he had just talked to in the hallway.
I knew there was some people in the room next to me, and I didn't see them get out, and they were virtually above it, too.
Room checks found no evidence of bodies. All 9 known fatalities were found in the lobby or nearby meeting rooms. Bodies were taken to an area of the parking lot away from horrified relatives arriving to learn the fate of loved ones. Several people were injured, including the pilot, Major Bruce Teagarden of Las Vegas. The 35-year-old pilot with 2,000 flying hours under his belt is in good condition at the Fort Benjamin Harrison Hospital. He ejected to safety when impact was imminent. A somber and concerned Mayor Hudnut surveyed the scene and concluded it was the city's worst disaster in 24 years.
Well, I think this is probably the worst thing to hit the city since the Coliseum disaster in 1963 in terms of multiple casualties, multiple fatalities. It's obviously a disaster of significant proportions.
The mayor tried to offer words of encouragement to relatives who heard about the disaster and arrived at the scene. In a neighboring building, they were told what little authorities knew, then taken to the nearby Adams Mark Hotel to await further word. Friends and relatives were shocked and confused. A hotel switchboard operator had called his parents right after the crash.
Around, I'd say 9:40, my son called, and he said, "Mom," he said, "I'm okay." I said, "Are you hurt?" He said, "No, Mom, I'm not hurt." I said, "Okay, we'll be there in a minute." And he said, "Okay," and the phone, I don't know if it went dead, hung up or what, because I was upset, and so was he.
So you're waiting now, not knowing.
We cannot find out information.
We still don't know the fate of 21-year-old Christopher Evans tonight. This woman has 2 daughters who work at the Ramada. She arrived fearing the worst to find one had the day off. The other was inside, but escaped.
I just knowed she, was going to be dead, but I thank God she ain't.
First of all, let me just tell you that Air Force policy is very simple. We obviously, first and foremost, try to save lives. If we have an aircraft malfunction like this, we try to minimize danger to people. The last consideration, obviously, is safety of the airplane, if you will, the machinery.
Small plane has hit the main branch, and there is a fire.
Base dispatcher number 3.
Hello, sir. I'm calling to report a terrible fire at the Ramada Inn on 465.
Those were some of the first calls to area police agencies, alerting them to the crash of the small plane into the Ramada Inn and ensuing fire. Witnesses say they first saw the Air Force A-7 experience trouble just before the crash.
I saw the jet coming in. I saw an explosion, and after the explosion, I saw one parachute open up. And after the parachute opened up, the jet had come in, came off the bank here, Bank 1, and then went into the front of the hotel.
Then when it really caught my eye, the plane was just kind of floating. Then I saw the explosion. The plane went down very, very fast. Then I saw the pilot eject and watched him come down.
Did you see an explosion in the air before it did?
Yes, definitely. Very, very big explosion.
Investigators say the jet first clipped the roof of the Bank 1 branch right across the street from the hotel. After hitting the bank, the aircraft ripped into the second floor of the 7-story Ramada Inn, causing an immediate fireball and producing thick black smoke.
We saw a big ball of fire, and everything was shattering around. We dug under the table, and I grabbed my briefcase and ran out of the back door of the hotel.
No one inside the bank was hurt, and the pilot of the jet, 35-year-old Bruce Teagarden, ejected safely from the plane. He is in good condition at the Fort Benjamin Harrison Hospital.
He had 44 miles to go to Terre Haute without any thrust, any power. Or he had 15 miles to make it to Indianapolis. And if I were in his shoes, I would have done the same thing and tried to bring the airplane down safely.
Nightfall may have slowed the investigative effort, but the U.S. military remains on the scene looking for answers. Investigators hope the light of a new day will also shine new information into the cause of this air tragedy. Marilyn Lease, Channel 6 News.
Sometimes an aggressive interior attack is the only way to stop a fire, but the risks are great. Hello and welcome to American Heat. I'm Don Marsh.
And I'm Ron Barber. We are reminded of those risks this month in a segment from Indianapolis. There, 15 firefighters were injured when a floor of a burning shrine temple collapsed. Fire Captain Ken Hines reports on the incident and the rescue.
On the initial report, I thought I had some dead fire.
The unexpected. We learn to deal with it every day as firefighters. On February 9, 1988, here in Indianapolis, the unexpected happened. What began as a storage room fire turned into an ordeal of unknown injuries, firefighters trapped, and the subsequent rescue of those initial fire attack companies. The first call, fire at the historic Murat Shrine Temple in downtown Indianapolis. Fire in the attached ballroom, offices, and party facilities. The first arriving companies faced heavy smoke on the second floor.
We knew we had a fire in the shrine. It was shown in the overhang in the northwest corner of the shrine club.
The initial size-up showed that the fire was burning in a converted storage room off the far end of the second floor ballroom. That storage room would soon become a nightmare for first arriving firefighters from the 7s.
My engine company at the time, we had strung a it's a 3/4 line up to the second floor. And the interior attack had already started. We had knocked the fire down with another engine company in the initial storage area. And another engine company proceeded up the stairway to try and knock down the fire that was up in the loft area.
Here's the way the room measured up. 22 feet by 13 feet by 18 feet high. But a wooden loft 8 feet off the floor had been added. The loft cut the room in half. It was supported by heavy girders and joists anchored into ledgers, which attached to the walls. The loft floor was plywood. There were 2 sets of doors into the storage area. One was an inward swinging double door, which had been sealed off with shelving. The other single door came off the food preparation room.
The fire got a head start on us. Then when we started making our layout, we came up short. It was a long layout. I can't remember how long it was. But everything was eating up time. And by the time we got in there and started putting water on that second loft and, you know, the weight became doubled and tripled, then just all kitchen conditions were right.
Unfortunately, firefighters did not know how long the room had been burning. After the fact, it was estimated that almost 20 minutes had gone by between ignition and the time water was first applied. That's well into the time period when collapse can occur.
And we went in, we thought we had an easy fire. We charged the lines, opened the door up. They come in with a couple swaps at it 3 or 4 times, knocked it all down, and then they stood at the doorway and had all the fire knocked down.
It seemed to be that they had a knockdown take place. And within a short period of time after that, then there was a call over the radio that the floor, I think he actually said stair, but he said he had a collapse and he had personnel trapped.
Restaurant-type stainless steel carts that were cluttered in the area, and we're trying to remove them, get them outside, so we had a little more working room. And without any warning at all, it was just a crack, and then it was on top of it. There was no warning at all whatsoever.
Everyone was on or in the debris, and the smoke was heavy. An unknown number of firefighters were screaming for help.
I really didn't know exactly what had happened, but then it seemed like there was a moment of silence, and then everyone started screaming, the guys that were trapped.
My honest initial assessment was that from the first guy, I was able to visualize that if they had any life-threatening emergencies, they were dead, because we weren't going to get them out fast enough. So if they had severe hemorrhage, if they had respiratory compromise, they were in serious trouble.
Fortunately, some firefighters were able to free themselves. Others could not. Then the bell started to go off.
The entrapment was so bad on about 4 of them, they could not reach their face masks to get them off when they were running out of air. And fortunately for the guys who were around them, a couple of them were able to reach their own, but a couple of them had other people take their face pieces off for them. They, in fact, did run out of air. At that point in the fire, they'd had their tanks on long enough that probably at 5 minutes we were hearing bells ringing and people asking for help to get their face pieces off.
Firefighters were conscious and talking with their friends. Some good luck in all of this. For whatever reason, most of the trapped men had been on the north end, and that's where the shelving and bus carts had helped break the fall of the loft. Those bus carts probably saved a lot of lives that day.
Had not the carts used to serve food on been where they were, I'm sure the injuries would have been a lot greater, because the carts actually kept the lumber and material off some of the firefighters.
With smoke vented and debris just smoldering, controlled. But then firefighters began complaining of chlorine and ammonia fumes.
It seemed was such that extrication was what was going to happen. Then all of a sudden, Captain Thomas started yelling about the chemicals that were coming in on them. And they got pretty excited, and rightfully so, you know, because he said, hey, we're going to die in here if you don't get us out now.
There was also some high commercial detergent that was spilled in this collapse, and it was literally dripping down the faces and the collars of the firefighters, and they complained of burns, and nobody could get a handle on it. They complained of ammonia smell, chlorine smell, and we couldn't get a handle on that. We couldn't, for the life of us, figure out where they were getting that smell. You know, we thought about tanks being in the room, or bottles of chlorine, but we didn't really realize till later where that odor was coming from, why they were being burned.
A secondary collapse was always a possibility. It was a slow, tedious rescue.
The first effort was with high-pressure airbags to do an immediate lift on the first guy who was trapped, because he was in quite a bit of pain on the lower extremities. We did about 10 inches of lift off of his lower extremities, and then we went after a beam which was running east to west, which gave us a major lift point to alleviate a lot of pressure off of all of them that were still trapped. And we initially used a 10-ton porta-power, 2 of them on that, And to support that, both where we'd done the airbag lift and where we did the porta pilot lift, we were using box cribbing setup to keep it up. And then we went with a low pressure airbag on that same beam, which gave us an additional 2 feet of lift, and then box to crib that. And at that point, we seemed to have had, we had everybody loose except for the guy who was trapped the worst on the far side of the room and with the back, broken back.
Once they started maneuvering things around, they tunneled into us, and by way of the trays that were there, or these fruit carts, it kept it from pinning us right to the floor, and they were able to tunnel into us, and they got Donnie out, because Donnie was suffering from burns that were really troubling him bad. He had to get out.
But little by little, trapped friends were located and removed.
The firefighters trapped were actually closer to the window than they were to the door, and thank God for that, or it might have taken us another hour or two to get them out.
It took almost 2 hours before the last trapped firefighters were removed. Injuries were serious: broken bones, smoke and toxic vapor inhalation, burns, and in one case, a crushed vertebrae. But the rescue had been completed.
They didn't leave the firefighters trapped. They made sure that they kept in voice communications. They kept talking to them. It was above and beyond the call of duty for the individuals that were actually involved in the rescue. They did an outstanding job.
Before the incident was completely finished, we had started our critical incident stress debriefing. We had psychologists on the scene. That night, we went to every fire station and talked to every firefighter that was involved.
We had some severe stress problems, emotional problems. In my 23 years of service, that's one of the greatest emotional stresses I've seen on firefighters in that particular instance.
And what about the lessons learned?
Training is the name of the game. Our people are constantly training to handle such circumstances, and it really pays off. It proved once again that ICS is everything that I thought it was. In a situation such as that, had it not been for ICS, I think there would have been a lot more traffic on the air, a lot bigger problem for our communications, and people who needed resources, might not have gotten them as a result of so much traffic on the air. It was controlled this time.
One thing we did learn was getting a handle on incoming resources, because firefighters they're aggressive, they want to get in there and help their buddies out, and it did more harm than good in this case because there was no room for them.
The tactical unit has probably the best equipment in the state of Indiana to rescue in heavy rescue situations. But a big portion of our tactical rescue people were trapped in this fire. So we're going to train another unit somewhere, and we've got a tentative unit named, in the use of this equipment.
As Indianapolis firefighters readily admit, they were lucky. And quite unexpectedly, none of their friends died. I'm Ken Hines for American Heat in Indianapolis, Indiana.
A fire at the Murat Shrine Temple in downtown Indianapolis within the hour has left 3 firefighters trapped in that historic building.
Down on top of them. Said he might have a broken leg. They're all conscious talking to us. We need to get moved from this side. All right, Car 2, give me a third alarm on this. All right, take it around the back. Come on.
When workers fled the building, they never imagined the ordeal ahead. 25 to 30 people were inside getting the Shrine Club dining room ready for lunch when the fire alarm sounded.
I was in the kitchen preparing food, and all of a sudden there's some smoke.
We were getting ready to open for lunch, and we just heard the siren go off, and just saw smoke coming out of the kitchen vents, and that was it, you know, and everybody just got out.
The remaining apparatus, stage and station 7.
Firefighters only had to cross the street to reach the blaze. It started in a second-floor storage room just off the Arabian Ballroom. On its lower level, dishes were stored. Paper and some cleaning products were in a loft area about 15 feet above the floor.
So if you could join us, sir, we understand you are the manager here at the Murat. Is that
I'm the manager of the Shrine Club.
The Shrine, okay. The Shrine Club. Is that where the fire was located within the Shrine Club area? Your name, sir, is?
John Preston.
Okay, Mr. Preston. Do you have a feel yet as to what may have caused this blaze?
I do not know what caused the blaze, sir. I only know the area that the blaze was in.
When the fire was discovered, tell us how the fire department was contacted, and I assume there were employees that needed to get out quickly.
The alarm went off indicating fire. I checked the switchboard and saw that it was the fire alarm. I personally called the department across the street through the 911 service and told them that we had a fire. As soon as I hung up, I picked up my Motorola and contacted the key personnel on both sides of the house, the temple and the club. I told them we had a fire and to slowly evacuate everyone from the building. Then I went on the intercom so that the public would be notified and told them the same message. After that, I hung up both of those instruments, and I personally went through the Shrine Club, all 3 floors, and my beverage manager went through the basement. We made sure that everyone was out. We were the last 2 to exit, and then we came outside, and that was it.
How many employees might have been there at that time?
In the neighborhood of 30 on the Shrine Club and approximately 10 or so on the temple side.
Are the 2 buildings connected, or are they in fact
separate? They're connected by doorways. Yeah, they're connected.
But this, again, by way of explanation, this was in the Shrine Club, not in the temple itself.
On the second floor of the Shrine Club.
All right. We have a question at the station.
Yes, that does answer something. There were alarm systems throughout the building then, is that correct?
Yes, that's our understanding. Okay. This alarm system apparently did as it was supposed to do.
It's a national alarm. It did real well.
All right.
It's very good.
No injuries then, to your knowledge, to any of your employees?
Not to my people, only the fire department people.
All right.
We can get her off the line. I have no idea. All right. There's 20, I think, but just some for all of them. We've had a stairwell collapse that has pinned 5 firefighters. We've got 2 of the firefighters out. 3 of them are still pinned inside the stairwell area.
In total, 8 firefighters were trapped in the second floor storage area where the fire broke out. The first of the victims was rescued within 10 minutes, but others remained pinned beneath heavy debris from shelving and a portion of wall that collapsed. 4 were pinned dangerously close to the fire with little air debris. Oxygen tanks were hustled into the building by some of the 75 firefighters on the scene of the 3-alarm blaze. For more than an hour and a half, firefighters worked, inhaling smoke while digging ever so gingerly through the debris, trying to avoid another collapse. It was a rescue that was physically and emotionally exhausting.
You can hear them in there crying for help. You know, and some of them were in really terrible positions. They were folded up double. Their legs were compressed underneath them. Some of them had air tanks on their backs still that were being compressed into them.
For family members, the wait was like an eternity. But as the final firefighter was lifted from the charred room to a waiting ambulance, despair had turned to relief.
It was very scary, and then I see my husband coming, and it makes it all worth the wait to know that he's okay.
Some of you pass underneath and get out. Go easy now.
That's fine.
Really?
The injured
injured firefighters were lowered to the waiting arms of their peers and, in this case, fearful wife. Mary Kay Pitts was downtown when she learned her husband might be trapped. Chris Pitts was one of 6 firefighters stabilized at a triage area where emergency medical personnel from local hospitals, fire departments, and private ambulance services quickly gathered.
It's very difficult about the first 15 minutes. It's pretty chaotic. You just have to, as soon as you arrive, you have to start a systematic approach and just set up a system.
The system appeared to work as Mrs. Pitts watched her husband being moved to Wishart.
Yeah, I think he's got another patient over there, but besides that, Carl Beaver is at the hospital. So if you're going over there anyway...
In various stages of injury, one by one, the firefighters were rescued and treated. Clancy Reno was another who waited for word about her husband.
He's okay. I hope all the other guys are okay, too.
It was a helpless feeling for the off-duty firemen who lacked the necessary equipment to help.
It's difficult. I just got back from the Lawrence Township funeral, and I guess it comes in 3, so, you know, it's not the best situation to be in.
Well, when I heard there were 3 of them or 4 of them trapped, now there's how many? 5? 5 of them trapped. I'm just glad they're all right. I mean, we already had